So you return, and sooner than expected. I see. Too many swordsmen, are there?
Comedy.
Smash Bros. Has swords. A lot of swords. As the franchise has grown and evolved, more and more characters that use swords have been added as playable fighters. There are plenty of other weapon types used as well, but swords are by far the most common. This got me thinking, exactly how many swords are in Smash Ultimate? I was going to make this into a YouTube short, but then I realized that there was a lot of material to go over, more than a 60-second short could possibly cover. So let's go over all the swords present in Smash Ultimate's playable roster. And I mean all of them, including swords that are only part of individual moves. Just a note, I will only be covering the swords in the playable roster. I'm not going over any assist trophies, Pokeball Pokemon, items, or spirits. If I did that, we'd be here all day. Now let's get started. From the Smash 64 cast, we have Link and his signature Master Sword. Then we also have Kirby with 2 swords, a silver scimitar in his up special Final Cutter, and one in his final smash, the Ultra Sword. Moving on to the Melee cast, we start with Sheik. She has a dagger in her final smash, the Sheikah Dance. She doesn't use this weapon anywhere else. Okay, I know that's a bit of a stretch, but Smash Wiki lists it as a sword, and a dagger is a sword-like bladed weapon, so I'm counting it. Next is Zelda. Her down special summons a phantom that uses a big sword. Then there's Young Link. Instead of the Master Sword, he uses the Kokiri Sword from Ocarina of Time. There's also Ganondorf, who has 3 swords. First is the one he uses in all his smash attacks, the Space World 2000 sword. Then he has twin great swords that he uses in his final smash. He also uses these swords in his boss battle as Ganon, which is just like the final battle of Ocarina of Time. His Brawl and Smash 4 iterations had the Sword of Sages from Twilight Princess, but he only used it in a taunt and a custom move. Smash Ultimate doesn't have this sword. Lastly, we have the first 2 Fire Emblem characters, Marth and Roy. Marth uses the Falchion, which is the Fire Emblem character icon in Smash, and Roy uses the Binding Blade, also known as the Sword of Seals. Now we move on to the Brawl characters, but there aren't actually that many new swords. First is Meta Knight and his Galaxia sword. Then there's Pit with his Palutena bow, which splits into twin blades. I've never heard anyone call Pit's weapons swords, but they are bladed weapons with hilts that look a lot like swords. And Smash Wiki does list them as swords, so I'm going with that. We also have Ike with the 2-handed sword Rognell. And lastly, there's Toon Link with his version of the Master Sword. Next up is the Smash 4 cast, and there are quite a few new swords. There's Mega Man with his forward air, the Flame Sword. This is a power he gets from the Robot Master Swordman in Mega Man 8. Then we have Greninja with his Water Swords. These are present in his smash attacks and forward air. Fun fact, these were water katanas back in Smash 4, but they were changed to water kunai in Smash Ultimate. Next is the Mii Sword Fighter. This sword can be changed to a whole bunch of different swords depending on the costume you use, but it's only a cosmetic change, not a functional one. There are a total of 51 Mii Sword Fighter outfits in Smash Ultimate, including both base game and DLC outfits. 10 of those outfits are repeats of certain costumes to account for male and female Miis, which brings us down to 41 swords. There's also the fact that these 6 swords are redundant with other playable characters that already use these swords, so they're not really new. That means the Mii Sword Fighter brings a total of 35 new swords to the table. After that, we have Lucina and Robin. Lucina uses the Parallel Falchion, which is a different version of Marth's Falchion. Robin uses 2 swords, a Bronze Sword and a Levin Sword. There's also Dark Pit, who uses twin blades just like Pit. Then we have Shulk with his huge Monado sword, which is basically a fancy lightsaber. Up next is Cloud, who has 2 swords. Or should I say, 7 swords. His default weapon is the Buster Sword, and his Advent Children costume uses the Fusion Sword, which is a combination of 6 smaller swords. You can see the Fusion Sword split into its separate parts during the Omnislash version 5 Final Smash. Lastly, there's Corrin with the Omega Yato Sword. This is supposed to be a chainsaw sword, which sounds really cool on paper, but the chainsaw part only comes into play during their forward smash's charging animation. Fun fact, this is the only instance of a smash attack charging animation having a hitbox. I just think that's really neat. And finally, there's Smash Ultimate. This game added just as many swords as Smash 4. First we have Chrom with his sealed falchion, which is an updated version of Marth's falchion. Marth, Chrom, and Lucina are all technically using the exact same sword, just in different time periods. Joker uses a dagger alongside his gun. This dagger is pretty short, so it might be tough to classify as a sword, but SmashWiki lists it as a sword, so I'll go with that. Hero uses a sword and shield combo just like Link, and each individual hero uses a different sword. The Luminary uses the Supreme Sword of Light from Dragon Quest XI. Erdrick uses the Sword of Kings from Dragon Quest III. This sword is also used in the Erdrick Mii Sword Fighter costume. Solo uses the Zenithian Sword from Dragon Quest IV. And 8 uses the Dragovian King Sword from Dragon Quest VIII. Next up, Violet uses the Sword of the Creator, which can extend itself into a whip. Next is Minecraft's Steve. He uses swords in several of his attacks. He has 5 different swords: wood, stone, iron, gold, and diamond. Each of them has their own damage and knockback values, and gold has faster frame data than all the others. After that, there's Sephiroth and his incredibly long Masamune. This sword really pushes the limits of an acceptable melee range in Smash. Or at least it would if it wasn't for Min Min. But she doesn't use swords, so she doesn't count for this video. But 2 more characters that do count are Pyra and Mithra, who each use their own Aegis sword. Rex actually uses these swords alongside them in Xenoblade 2, but he's just a side character in Smash Ultimate. And finally, Sora uses a Keyblade called the Kingdom Key. So in the end, that gives us a grand total of 29 characters with swords, or sword-like weapons. Or 30 if you count Pyra and Mithra separately. And as for the number of actual swords, that comes out to a whopping 84. Swords are one of the most popular weapons in fictional media, so it's no surprise there are so many in video games and subsequently so many in Smash. Still though, it's pretty surprising to see just how many there really are. I wonder how many of these swords will return in the next Smash.